Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Generations in Dialogue, Bridging Perspectives in AI. Through these podcasts, we aim to represent diverse perspectives across generations, fostering rich conversations about the ever-changing landscape of AI. Generations in Dialogue aims to feature unique outlooks from AI experts, practitioners, enthusiasts of all backgrounds, and each episode will cover important topics ranging from delving deeper into the history of AI to exploring the future ethical implications of its newest technologies. My name is Ella, and I'll be the host for this episode. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Roberto Martín-Martín. We're so honored to have him today. He's currently an assistant professor of CS at the University of Texas at Austin. His research focuses on robotics, computer vision, and machine learning. And basically, he's aiming to create intelligent machines that can perceive, learn, and act autonomously. Inspired by human cognition, he integrates AI-driven perception, learning, and control to develop robotic systems capable of complex tasks like navigation and manipulation. Previously, he was an AI researcher at Salesforce AI and a postdoctoral scholar at Stanford, working with Professors Silvio Savarese and Fei-Fei. He also holds a Ph.D. from the Technical University of Berlin and has received multiple awards, including the RSS Best System Paper Award and the ICRA Best Paper Award. Dr. Martín-Martín is also an RSS pioneer and serves as a chair of the IEEE/RAS Technical Committee in mobile manipulation. Again, Dr. Martín-Martín, we are so excited to have you today. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump into the first question. So, this is a relatively general one just to get the ball rolling. So, what exactly inspired you to kind of choose your research direction to explore robotic systems and embodied AI?
Yeah, yeah. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm super happy to be here and to talk to you, Ella. Um, yeah, what inspired me to get into robotics and embodied AI? So I think it was since I was very little. I really wanted to understand how my toys and my machines kind of like functioned, how they moved, how they did things. So my favorite toy, I always say it was a screwdriver. And yeah, I was opening all my toys and trying to figure out how they did the things that they do, kind of like my, I don't know, my Scalextric, my kind of like small cars, my everything. And it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot of things. Or I thought I was learning a lot of things at least. My parents were not super happy, but but yeah, it was the curiosity to understand how and why these machines were demonstrating this physical behavior, these kind of like motions, and this kind of like that was for me like magic. Um, yeah, and that was trying to understand and to generate this type of physical behavior is what attracted me about robotics and embodied AI.
Very interesting. And obviously that's like the fact that you were what is it, excited about this ever since a very young age is definitely so incredible. Would you say that your perspective on what robotics is and what embodied AI is has shifted across time, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, definitely a lot. And yeah, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was very interested on more like the mechanical part
Okay.
of things. I kind of like moved into the electronic part of things because I realized a lot of the intelligence of my toys was embedded into those circuits. And I was curious to know what are all these things that are here. So I kind of like my undergrad is in what is would be, it was in Spain, but it would be the equivalent to ECE or
Okay.
EE here in the US. But then I realized that in a big component, I don't want to say things in mechanical, things in electrical are completely done. There's still a lot to do for robotics, but I think one of the biggest challenges is in the computational side of things, in the reasoning side of things. We have decent embodiments for robotics, but still how to make decisions, how to control, how to perceive the environment, how to connect this perception to what is the best thing to do is, yeah, at some point I realized there is at least where the biggest challenges and the most interesting ones for me were. And that's why I shifted a little bit from more on the physical embodied side only into more on the embodied reasoning
Mm.
part of things. So I went more into so CS, let's say AI, algorithms, but still with an eye always on the embodiment, on how the embodiment can do part of the task, this embodied computation field of, okay, there's some component where the embodiment is actually performing part of the task,
Mm.
but there's still some decision to be made based on vision, based on perception. Yeah, so how is this combination more powerful? So that was the shift, I would say.
Got it. That makes so much sense. I feel like, yeah, robotics is one of those like fields in like, I guess in the entirety of engineering where there's just so many different components, right? So
Yeah,
you need so much interdisciplinary like knowledge, kind of collaboration.
yeah.
I guess, yeah, speaking of collaboration as well, how would you say like, how would you see how embodied AI can kind of redefine the way that we interact with machines in the next generation?
hmm Yeah, definitely. I mean, the next generation is going to be around embodied machines, and I think that is what is going to be changing. And I was realizing the other day when I was coming uh, from Triple AI, and I saw some elderly kind of like boarding in the on the plane, and they were still their tickets printed.
Hmm.
And I know that, yeah, kind of like my parents also kind of like things printed, and it's this different by generations, different ways of interacting with different embodied technology. And yeah, we're so used to use our phones that for us it's simpler to kind of like pick up our phone and find our boarding pass. But for someone that is not so used to use a phone, kind of like a smartphone, is simpler to just have it printed. And I guess that is gonna kind of like that is always how technology goes. And I guess in the future, people will be more adapted to use robots. So what we should be doing in robotics is to make robotics for everyone, even for the ones that are not born with robots around,
Mhm.
and they're still very intuitive and very helpful. But there will be always differences in, yeah, if I'm used to talk to a person, and that is another thing. Like my parents, for example, always want to go to the bank branch to talk to the representative directly instead of doing things on internet.
Mhm.
I've been always used to do my bank operations on internet, so I never go to a bank branch. Uh,
Yeah.
I I just not used to it. So I think that will happen also in the future with embodied AI as robots become more and more part of our society. Some people will be used to just interact with embodied AI and with
Yeah.
robots more, and others will just be more used to do a human-to-human interaction, and that will be fine. I think we need to keep uh, all options available.
Absolutely. And would you say that obviously it's like we want to be able to, like, my parents have basically the exact same story, I would say. I think definitely because different generations are kind of born in like different environments, we're familiar to different kinds of things. So definitely having these different options is a very accessible way to ensure everyone is included.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is a way to maybe make the new technology, especially technology nowadays when it's like trying to focus on like improving human life? Is there a way for us to make this technology in a way where even those who are less familiar with the technological world, like they can still benefit or they feel comfortable using these kinds of technologies? And then if you have like a specific example or anything, feel free to throw that in as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are ways in which I think the ACI community, the human computer interface community, there is a lot that we can learn from them on how to make things accessible and available for us and intuitive for as much people as possible. But also, we're in robotics in charge of early on figuring out how to integrate everyone. And in one of the projects that I've been working on in collaboration with some of my former colleagues here at UT, with Sam Shorey and Rushira, who was a student with me. We asked this question of why people want to automate different things. Why do people have different preferences of what they would like a robot to do for them? uh,
Interesting.
Depending on, for example, their gender identification or their socioeconomic status, so the class that they belong to. And we try to figure out if there is some correlations between different tasks at different that the different social subgroups prefer to automate.
Yeah.
Um, to see, because at the end, yeah, otherwise, if roboticists are not in charge of kind of like looking also on that and try to cover all the cases. Um, yeah, I think the companies are going to look for the more of the economical side of things, and then they miss some opportunities and some social goods that could be done with robots that are maybe kind of like slightly different to what to what the mainstream of people would like to get automated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you have like maybe a specific example of maybe a robot which has already been created or is kind of in the works, or maybe a project that you were working on, which you really feel like emphasized? It's like not just looking at the financial aspects that a certain innovation can bring, but also like how it could actually impact people in that sort of like a beneficial way.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, my research is, I would say, a bit more on the fundamental side. So we
Yeah.
don't go to the full kind of like spectrum of application.
Mhm.
So in that sense, what we try is, for example, when we're measuring how useful one of our algorithms is that controls a robot, we try to bring people that has a mixed of that represents basically society in a mixed way. So, for example, in a recent project that we have some assistive technology based on visual language models, we try to bring people that are representative of the distribution of people, gender, and other qualities that may be using this technology. So that is, I think, the best we can do to not kind of like bias, because it has been demonstrated that many times in research we unconsciously bias our results because we test with the people that is around us, which is kind of like researchers like us, and that may not be the most representative group. And
Yeah.
the same thing we did in a project that we did when I was at Stanford still, and we were asking people, that was one of the sources for the second project that they mentioned. We were asking people, what do you want a robot to do for you? So we explicitly look for a very varied pool of people in gender identification, in age, in socioeconomic status, so that we get kind of like a good picture of what everyone wants and
Yeah.
not just what technologies wants. Because if I ask people in my lab, they know what robots can do. They know they are all kind of like young PhDs, kind of like there's differences in my group, but they are closer together than if we ask people from different cities, from different backgrounds, and I want all the voices to be heard.
Absolutely. With the surveys that you were conducting, with like trying to reach out to different people and then maybe seeing if a certain demographic wanted a specific type, were there any findings that you had which you felt like, oh, that's like very interesting, like maybe I hadn't considered that? Or in general, were there any maybe similarities between what kinds of robots different groups wanted?
Mhm. One interesting thing, I was expecting a big difference based on economical subgroups.
Yeah.
That's because the time that we invest on different tasks on tasks is very different, but
Yeah.
actually differences were not that strong. One of the differences, we also looked into correlating how people feel with different tasks. There is part of survey performed by the by the Labor of Statistics here in the US that ask your feelings when you are performing different tasks. Are you happy doing it? Do you think it's meaningful? So what we observe is that women tend to prefer to automate tasks that to not automate tasks that they find meaningful, while men prefer to automate tasks that they find rather painful or tiring. So yeah, there was a little bit of a difference in there between what seems to be correlated with what these subgroups prefer to automate.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, what I was most surprised is that there was less correlation, very little correlation between the different social subgroups and what they prefer to be automated by a robot.
Very interesting, very interesting. And yeah, okay, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about like that summary. I guess moving on little slightly, would you say there's been like a specific situation or an example where younger researchers in your lab who may not be as experienced in the field compared to you, but like they were able to introduce some sort of an idea that kind of impacted your work or kind of like shaped the way that your guys' research direction kind of went?
Mhm.
Or I guess more generally, it's like, do you think even within your lab, like when you're the people who are creating these robots, like do you guys bring in different perspectives and in what way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we all bring different perspectives, and I think it's one of the exciting things to do the job that I do, to be a professor, that you get to be exposed to these new perspectives, to these new ideas,
Mm,
constantly from new research, from new students. And I think that is that is the part that is exciting because all of these kind of like a new energy and new kind of like ways of looking at all projects is all it's very exciting. So I would say some of the things that have been kind of like push forward. Uh, I think from my students, definitely they like to test the latest of the latest. Uh, I try to bring kind of like a balance to try to also kind of like compare to other things, let's say
mm,
kind of like 5-year-old algorithms that are also still kind of like good performant.
mm.
Um, but definitely is a lot of energy on new foundation models, and I think that is very exciting to incorporate more and more. And I think I was never opposed, but I was always kind of like a bit kind of like let's test them. But they're being surprisingly good and surprisingly, definitely very, very, very strong and robust. So yeah, my students were very keen on testing them, and I'm happy that we did because they are definitely now one of the main tools that we're using.
That's so interesting. I love that. Amazing. And I guess on speaking of like, I don't want to say generations, but I guess like, do you think that like robots would be able to bridge like different generational gaps by assisting like diverse age groups a little bit differently? So kind of like shifting a little bit now from you guys who are creating it, like how can or in what way do you feel like robots should kind of develop so that they're able to actually impact like the people that they're like meant for in that sort of role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that goes back to the very first thing is to try to incorporate all the voices.
Okay.
Uh, and try to see. And I think in terms of applications, there's definitely going to be a lot of different ways in which robots can help different social groups being grouped by their age. Definitely is going to be a big problem. Uh, a really big challenge to take care in a good way of all our elderly. I'm from Europe, and from Spain is one of the countries that is kind of like very quickly moving into a very high age for most of the population.
Yeah.
Japan has a situation as well, and we want to give them a good life. I would like to live autonomously as much as possible. So I think there is a space for elderly care in robotics, but there is definitely a space for entertainment, for play around with kids, for example, which is very different domain. There is a household domain where robots can help and doing things. So I think there's different kind of like ages in which different type of robots can be targeted on. I think the
Yeah.
important thing is that if possible, it would be great that it's a technology that benefits everyone, and not just a subgroup. But yeah, definitely there are going to be sub things that, depending on the generation, they can be tailored for.
I love that. That makes so much sense. Do you think, in addition to obviously like just adapting it and then making sure everyone's voices are heard are like two of the key like fundamental parts. Do you think once like let's say we have like this perfect innovation, are there any like technical hurdles that you foresee in being able to achieve like truly adapting these kinds of autonomous robots into our daily lives?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think the adapting part is kind of like going to be critical, especially at the beginning. We don't want to have to adapt to them. We want them to adapt to us. Um, Yeah, I think with one of the successes that we have seen is with foundation models in language. They adapt very well to the conversation that you're having, and they are able to integrate to some extent, basically the mood in which you are replying, the kind of like they're able to guide and kind of like adapt to your responses. So I hope that robots can be done in a similar way. They can come with a basic general algorithm that is all the same, but with interactions with each of the different users, they can adapt to your preferences. Um, yeah, in the same way that a foundation model, ChatGPT, adapts by having a conversation with a user.
Makes sense, makes sense. Amazing. And I think going back a little bit onto you were talking about with like working with your students and your students wanting to try out new technologies, how would you recommend being able to balance teaching like the foundational concepts of like robotics and also like being able to explore cutting edge technologies, like the new developments?
Yeah.
Um, and I guess kind of uh adding on to that, are there any lessons that you feel like uh you've learned either from like the previous generation of like robotics that you might want to give to the um upcoming next generations? Because obviously nowadays it's like every time I open the news, I feel like there's always some sort of development that's being made, and it feels like a constant like feeling of like having to catch up, having to do like the next big thing. Like, do you have any advice in that aspect?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, for your first comment, yeah, I'm also teaching here a very broad and fundamental course for the robotics minor, which has kind of like the basic of robotics from starting from very mechatronics and electronics into a little bit of AI. We cover a lot, and yeah, my students kind of like hate me because I'm going too fast. But yeah, I think I want them to understand all, have a good coverage of everything, and I think it's important to have a good coverage, at least understand the basics of everything in robotics, because as you mentioned at the beginning, it's so multidisciplinary that even if you have your best AI algorithm, the best algorithm you can create, if, for example, your controller, your PID controller, very basic, is not the right one, your AI algorithm can be perfect, but it will fail. Or maybe your electronics are not working in the right way, or you are not. So just having a bit, even if you focus on one or the other, you focus on mechatronics, but you know a little bit about AI, or you know a little bit about electronics as well. So having a good coverage is important in robotics, and I think that is how it helps me to do cutting edge technology on one specific area, which is AI. But I need to create a solution that is a full solution, so I need to cover all the other areas as well. So that is how it connects. And if I have an advice for from looking at the past and moving into the future, I think one of the things that I've seen the most successful researchers to do and to say many times, and yeah, Fei-Fei was mentioning this several times, and yeah, Oliver, my advisor, or Rushira Basky, as well as Rusena Basky. So it's very easy to get anxious about getting on a wave that is coming, that you see is kind of like a very high. But once that the wave is high, it's very difficult to surf it. You have to start to surf it. You have to start kind of like paddling much earlier on. So it's better to focus on the next wave that comes. It's better to kind of like think out of the box and say, okay, everyone is doing this. Uh, can I do something slightly different instead of trying to jump into the wave that is already rolling? That doesn't mean kind of like ignoring what is going on, but trying to think critically and say, okay, there are some parts that I kind of like understand and follow from this, but what if I would try something slightly different? And as a researcher, I'm in the same boat. I mean, there are some trends that are everyone is kind of like jumping in, but you always have to kind of like stop and think, okay, can I do something different? How can I answer a different question that is not the question that everyone is trying to answer? Um,
Yeah.
I think that helps also to not feel like you're always behind because the wave is kind of like passing, but try to kind of like stop and say, okay, let me think about a slightly different thing that I can do on my own.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that answer. And I guess one of our last questions for today is, or this, yeah, I'll make this the last one. I think we're almost up to time anyway. This is a relatively general one as well. So if you want to, if there's anything during this conversation that you weren't able to bring up. Feel free to use this as an opportunity as well. But how do you envision like this collaboration between embodied agents and humans kind of evolving over the next decade? Because I think one of the things that, for me at least, before I actually even got into AI myself, I think I remember I saw some sort of a horror movie where basically they were like, oh my God, robots are taking over the world, like they're replacing humans, and I feel like that's an impression that a lot of people might have when they're not that familiar with the field. Like they feel very more threatened by like innovation rather than willing to accept it. Do you think there's a way to be able to kind of overcome this? And what kinds of like perspectives should researchers adapt and like innovators adapt as well as like potential users? Um, yeah, I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, yeah, I completely agree that all science fiction and sometimes media is making everything kind of like look like it's them versus us.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think it's the middle part is the most interesting one. How can machines kind of like enhance human capabilities? I think that's gonna be the future, and I think that is where we're going to. And even with we were talking about LLMs, foundation models. Even that it's been it has been a lot of kind of like discussion about jobs that they're gonna kind of like be replacing, but it's becoming more and more clear that what they are doing is enhancing the jobs of humans. And I think that is going to be with machines as well. In my lab, we are looking at several projects where human and robots collaborate, and they collaborate in kind of like the best ways. Robots are never going to be, well, never, I'm not going to say never, but robots are not very good at many things that
Yeah.
humans are much better at. Robots are better at other things that humans may not be so good at. For
Mm.
example, a very accurate robot may be able to kind of like do a millimeter precision thing that I don't know how to do, but a household robot may have difficulties on using, I don't know, a knife that needs to open something because it's not dexterous enough to do it. So I can do that part of the task. So can we collaborate and make tasks together in a
Yeah.
way that, yeah, we can help each other and kind of like do it in a better way instead of kind of like being all automated or nothing automated. So I think that this an intermediate path that is very exciting, where humans are still part of everything. Uh, and yeah, machines are there just to help us.
Amazing. I strongly agree. Actually, one of the classes that I'm taking right now also corroborates what you were saying. It's like inherently, it's like obviously a lot of the way that we're teaching AI and robotics is like we're trying to emulate how humans are like trying to learn, right? How a baby learns. But then you realize like fundamentally these like humans versus like technology, like they're inherently like better at some things, worse at others. So it's like if we're able to optimize what we're good at, then that's like the best of both worlds. So that makes so much sense. Amazing. All right. So I think that does conclude maybe like the end of this episode. To everyone who's watching, thank you so much for listening in. Thank you, Dr. Martin, for coming onto this episode and for sharing with us your insight. And yeah, if you're a viewer or a listener and you want to appear on this podcast, feel free to fill out the form that we'll have published on the Triple AI website by now. And yeah, looking forward to the next episode. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for your time, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for Ella again from this super nice, time with you.
Thank you so much. All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.